Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at an absolutely fascinating collision between ancient mythology and a modern global crisis. We're going to unpack how a centuries-old story, literally the origin myth of the Khmer New Year, actually provides a really profound blueprint for surviving a modern pandemic. We've got high-stakes wagers with gods, ancient riddles, and some pretty ultimate philosophical dilemmas to get through. Okay, let's dive into this. It sounds like the plot of a blockbuster movie, right? But this is the actual foundational myth of the Khmer New Year, from the Mahasamkala Sutta. It's a story that asks a pretty wild question. What if a simple bet between an all-powerful god and a mortal boy nearly resulted in the entire world catching fire? To understand how this connects to our modern world, we really first need to understand this ancient high-stakes thriller. Part 1. The Deadly New Year Riddle. A deity, a prodigy, and a wager. So picture this. Our story centers around Thambabal. He's the 7-year-old prodigy who could literally understand the language of birds. On the other side, we have Kapila Mahabrahma, a super powerful 4-faced deity. Now, this deity was consumed by jealousy over the boy's fame. He just couldn't stand that people were starting to respect this little kid's teachings more than his own. So coming down from heaven, the deity challenges the boy to the ultimate wager. He tells him, answer 3 impossible riddles in exactly 7 days or lose your head. The stakes are absolute life and death here. If the boy solves them, the deity cuts off his own head. But if the boy fails, Dambabal's severed head becomes the deity's ultimate trophy. Talk about pressure. For 6 whole days, Damabal agonized over this. He just couldn't figure it out. Despairing, he hides under a palm tree, basically just preparing to die. But wait, remember how he understands the language of birds? Well, up in that exact tree, he miraculously overhears a male and female eagle discussing his impending death. And the male eagle just casually reveals the answers to the riddles. It turns out, where is a person's glory in the morning? It's on the face. At noon, on the chest. And in the evening, it's on the feet. This, by the way, is the actual mythological origin of why people wash their faces in the morning, splash water on their chests in the afternoon heat, and wash their feet before bed. Pretty cool, right? So, armed with these answers, Damabal actually wins the wager. The proud Kapila Mahabrahma loses and, keeping his word, has to cut off his own head. But there was a massive problem. His head was cursed with just unimaginable power. If it touched the earth, the entire world would burn. If it was thrown into the sky, boom, a 7-year drought. Tossed in the ocean, the seas would instantly boil dry. No way, right? So, to prevent an absolute apocalyptic disaster, the deity's 7 daughters had to step in. They had to take turns carefully carrying their father's head on a golden platter for a year each. And that rotation, that's the mythological origin of the annual cycle of the new year. Part 2. Decoding the fairy tale, the allegory beneath the myth. And this brilliantly illustrates that this isn't just a fairy tale. The source text argues it's actually a deeply sophisticated political and social allegory. It's like a mirror held up to society, deconstructing human nature and conflict. See, Kapila Mahabrahma isn't just a god. He represents leadership that's completely lost its modesty. Leaders who are so consumed by jealousy they refuse to let anyone else shine. Damabal, our prodigy, represents social activists who rise up to challenge unjust governance. Although the text does note he was somewhat opportunistic. I mean, he basically plagiarized the eagle's answers. And the eagles? They represent those highly knowledgeable opportunists who always know what's going on behind the scenes and just take advantage of all parties in a conflict. It is a total masterclass in analyzing power dynamics. Ultimately, this myth was designed as a timeless warning. Kapila Mahabrahma lost his life simply because he abandoned the core principles of mercy, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. He just couldn't be happy for someone else's success, and it utterly destroyed him. The myth is telling humanity that when we abandon these principles, especially those in power, it leads directly to societal and environmental disaster. Part 3. The modern crisis, when the plague arrives. Let's fast forward to today. Imagine a sudden outbreak. The source specifically notes a mix of cholera and the COVID-19 pandemic, arriving exactly during the New Year festival season. Now, think about this. The very festival that was created to stave off the mythic burning of the world is now threatened by a very real, very deadly contagion. This creates an absolutely agonizing philosophical dilemma for the people. The New Year is a time to gather at the pagoda, to honor ancestors, to celebrate culture. But gathering means spreading the plague. So the really tough question the author poses directly to the public is this. Should you risk your life and the lives of your entire community to gather at the pagoda for a cultural festival? Is preserving tradition actually worth dying for? Part 4, Valuing Life Over Culture, a Human-Made Tradition. So the crucial point is that people naturally fear skipping the festival is a betrayal of their Khmer cultural traditions and their Buddhism. But the author steps in here with a profoundly logical argument to settle the debate. Basically, culture is created by humans. Because of this, human life is intrinsically more valuable than the culture it produces. The author points out something really simple but powerful. The pagodas were built by the people. If a plague wipes out all the people, who's going to be left to remember the pagoda, right? If the creators of the culture die out, the culture dies right along with them. You simply cannot protect a tradition by killing off the people who practice it. Now, some folks might fear this feels a bit like the dark times of the Khmer Rouge era, where culture was violently suppressed. But the author makes a really vital distinction here. During the Khmer Rouge era, there were no pagodas, no monks, and celebrating was strictly forbidden. The pandemic era, it's entirely different. The culture hasn't been banned at all. It just needs to adapt. The heavenly deities still descend, but they are compassionate. They understand the crisis, and they will happily receive your offerings safely at home rather than demanding a massive, dangerous gathering at the temple. And practically speaking, the text urges extreme caution to protect the very institutions people want to honor. If devotees carelessly gather, they risk bringing the plague directly to the monks. The source even brings up the tragic case of a monk in the US falling critically ill to COVID-19 as a stark warning. The brilliant adaptation here? If you must give alms, you can place them on a plate, stand 2 meters away, and offer them vocally. Giving respectfully through words alone is completely valid in Buddhism during a crisis. It's really that simple. Part 5. The Ultimate Dharma, the Hierarchy of Sacrifice. Let's move on and see how this builds. To finally put to rest any lingering guilt about staying home, the author turns to an ancient Buddhist framework meant to guide decision-making during extreme hardship. It's called the Hierarchy of Sacrifice. First, you should gladly sacrifice your wealth if it means saving your limbs or your body. Second, you should sacrifice your limbs if it means saving your life. And third, you should sacrifice even your life to preserve the Dharma, which is the ultimate truth and righteous path. So, what does this all mean for the pandemic? Well, the author flips the perspective. You aren't losing your culture by skipping the pagoda gathering. Actually, in this specific moment, the highest form of Dharma, the absolute most righteous action you can take, is the virtue of non-neglect. Sleeping at home, following government health rules, protecting your community, that is practicing the Dharma. Protecting life is the ultimate cultural preservation. And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The text leaves us with this incredibly powerful ancient proverb. Whoever preserves the Dharma preserves him. By adapting our traditions to protect human life, we aren't abandoning our culture. We're actually enacting its deepest, most compassionate teachings. It leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. When the next crisis hits, will we stubbornly cling to the shape of our traditions, or will we have the wisdom to preserve the human lives that make those traditions possible in the first place? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this, and as always, keep asking the big questions.